Good afternoon. Welcome back to another Team News live stream. Last week's was very important for Game Week 18. This one's as important, if not more important. This is double game week. That is bigger and better. And to take us through all the team news, injury news, lineup news, and that kind of stuff today, I'm joined by David. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Obviously, I can bring my first update is that Neil is still not in the squad. He's been left out again. So I'm here filling in. Using my versatility in a different role to cover for him. But as I always say, you at least still get to look at the same color hair, so you can't complain too much.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a bit like Sergio Aguero. We keep teasing him coming back, and then he just never ever appears for like months. But hopefully, he'll be back a bit sooner than Sergio Aguero. So we're going to go through all the team news as normal. I will just say before we get into individual teams, there's a few teams we haven't heard from yet or didn't give any team news. So West Brom was one. Didn't really get any team news from their press conference at all. Not that I think many people are probably putting players in, apart from Johnston, I guess. Everton, obviously not playing in Game Week 19, so there's nothing from them either. So we'll have to wait until Game Week 20 for updates about Calvert-Lewin. And Aston Villa, the team that probably a lot of us want to hear updates from, there's no press conference because they're not playing for when is it? Like so Wednesday or Thursday or something like that against Man City.
Yeah, that's right.
So because it's so far away, there's no press conference. So if you're looking for news about who's got COVID, who's still isolating, who's back available, unfortunately we don't have it, which sucks. But I think with Villa players, if you've got them, you play them, and you probably in most cases avoid buying them as well. So outside of that, we've pretty much got every other team covered. So we'll jump into it in just a second. I will just say before we go into Man City, which is the team we always start with, we have partnered with Fantasy 5. So if you haven't already checked them out, there's a handy link in the description below. Just click through to that. It'll take you straight through to the game. And it is basically super easy to play. And if you're an FPL player, it's even more handy because you already know all the scoring. The only difference in scoring is there's no bonus points. And you just have to make a quick, easy prediction. One player from each of the 5 games you can see listed. So Liverpool versus United, Man City versus Palace, Arsenal versus Newcastle, West Ham, West Brom. You definitely got to go for Antonio in that game, obviously. And Leicester versus Chelsea is the 5th game. So one player to beat their points total. And as you can see on screen, I think it's very winnable this week. Martial, for example, or Cavani would only have to score 1 goal. And you've only got to make 1 pick. Easy as that, completely free, 10 grand to the winner, no catches. Click that link in the description below and you can check it out. Let's get into the team news. Let's start with Man City. We always start with Man City. Obviously, a few surprises in the last game. I think a lot of people were hoping that Sterling would start, for example, in Game Week 18. It didn't happen. We did talk about that. You did say he never actually mentioned he was fully fit. It could have just been a tactical thing, of course. What are you thinking for this week? Is there any major updates?
Yeah, so I mean, handily enough, like we're not necessarily hanging on too much in the way of injury this time round. It's more about I guess what we're worried about, I suppose, is KDB and whether or not he's kind of exhausted or not. Which I mean, he looked it, didn't he? In terms of the actual update itself, there's no update in terms of training because today Man City are having the day off, which is nice for some, and the training is all tomorrow. So any update from that, like we're just not going to know. So someone could all easily break down in training tomorrow. But he's saying that Garcia's back. He said the guys from the academy will be back, which I think he's referring to people like Palmer and Doyle. So again, just people that we're just not that bothered by. He said again that Laporte and Ake aren't fit, which is helpful because it means we can be quite confident that Diaz and Stones will start because he just doesn't really have any alternative. But also they're also playing amazing as well. Like they're a really strong partnership together. So between that and these injuries, they're very, very safe picks for this week. He's also said that Sergio Aguero won't be available either. So we mentioned on the last stream, didn't we, that maybe that means that Jesus can play. He obviously didn't. I think he played Bernardo Silva in that centre forward role. So we don't have anything. It's kind of annoying. The questions that he gets asked in these press conferences, I feel like they're a little bit wasted. And I don't want to insult my fellow journalists, but I would be asking so many more tactical questions, like who's going to play centre forward? Where's De Bruyne going to play? Is he exhausted? A lot of these questions, like that, we really want to know the answers to. They don't always go for them.
You mean people aren't just obsessed with fantasy football? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Well, I still think these things are relevant for
They are. Yeah.
for main football fans too. I think Man City fans, I mean, in a typical scenario, would be paying to go see their team every week. Obviously, they can't at the moment, but in a normal scenario, they'd quite like to know who's going to line up at centre forward when Aguero's out. So, yeah, it's a shame. I mean, to be fair, would Guardiola really give a specific answer to those questions? I'm not sure, but Yeah, unfortunately, what we've got is the usual Guardiola kind of. It's not that exciting and quite cryptic. So, I mean, one other thing that I do want to talk about is there's some stuff about Cancelo, which, I mean, anyone who's owned Cancelo has enjoyed his points recently. It kind of feels like there's more to come. It's a double game week, so even if you're worried about rotation, he's surely going to play one of them. But it's still just worth kind of looking at these quotes from Guardiola that kind of refer to uh, any concern that people might have about rotation, where Guardiola's basically said every player in his squad has competition from his teammates. He said even the manager to himself, if they're not playing well, then he has competition in the sense that the press start linking people with the club to replace him. It says it happens to the best of all of us, and then he specifically said even for João Cancelo. So it's a little bit ominous because it sounds like a precursor to a rotation. He then goes on to talk about what competition Cancelo provides to Walker. He was basically asked, "Is this the first time that Carl Walker has had proper competition for his place?" Guardiola said, "I don't agree. I think he had good competition when Danilo was here. Always he had competition, but I felt he was more necessary than the others, which is why he signed Cancelo. It counts now." So he's saying that he does have strong competition now. Um, in a way, I don't know how much that really, really helps us, but because of course Cancelo can actually play on the left. But then again, even that is helpful for this game week in terms of whether or not you're worried that Cancelo will play. Because even if he wants to play Walker, then Cancelo obviously can play on the left, and I think we'd all agree has looked better than both Mendy and Zinchenko at some point this season. So there has been discussion about him. Nothing that suggests that a benching is imminent, but at the same time, just a reminder that there's competition for even the best players in Guardiola's squad, even João Cancelo.
Yeah, I think we've probably been a bit spoiled recently with Cancelo, Stones, and Diaz all playing. We have to try to remind ourselves that Man City, there is rotation. There's two games really quickly. It's probably going to happen for most players. De Bruyne obviously is the one we always hope won't happen to, but even he, there's a chance of it. Obviously, I think there's 3 days in between the two games, and it is worth noting then it's FA Cup before the next Premier League game, so there could be rotation in that one to give the main players like De Bruyne, Diaz, Stones a bit of time off. But yeah, I think with Cancelo, he's always going to probably be like a 4-in-5 player rather than a 5-in-5. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's interesting quotes though. So yeah, I'll be annoyed if he doesn't start both of them, but I guess it's the risk you take. And I still think he's a great long-term pick. So unless you're free hitting this week, I think you should probably still be quite happy with him. Let's go on to other side of Manchester. We'll just go straight to Man United. So I think Martial went off with a bit of a knock in the last game. I don't know if it was hamstring or ankle. Do you know what it was? It looked like hamstring, but then I saw people saying it was his ankle. But
yeah, it was actually quite hard to track down information on this, to be perfectly honest. I'm not sure either.
okay.
He limped off. He wasn't discussed in the post-match presser after Burnley. I stayed up especially late to have Solskjaer give me an update, and he didn't give one. So yeah, he's been a bit kind of clouded on what the situation is with Martial, which is a bit annoying. But he's finally kind of referenced him in a bit more detail in this press conference. He's basically said, "I'll give everyone tomorrow a chance to prove their fitness." There's a couple of knocks we got at Burnley that I'm not sure about. He then goes on to reference Martial, saying that Martial's not out of this game. So there's enough there to suggest that there is doubt because he's having to sort of clarify that. The only ones who are out are Brandon Williams and Phil Jones. So sorry, guys, really limited now without those two. But the ominous thing, of course, is that he said that a couple of knocks we got at Burnley. So Martial's one that we know about. Who are the others? We're just not really sure. So it's Liverpool, so he's going to play the best team he possibly can. But of course, it is a little bit concerning because it's Fulham afterwards, and you maybe think that he might view that as that's the game when he can afford to maybe rest someone. I don't know if they've had to overstretch themselves, carry a knock into the Liverpool game. Maybe they won't play the other one.
Yeah,
But
I think so. I think I was looking at the quotes from him and the quotes from Klopp. We'll talk about Liverpool next. I think there's a few mind games going on. If Martial is in any way fit to start, I think he will start because I just think he'll want that pace up against that Liverpool defence. So I think he will start. Obviously, that's just my opinion. I'm not in the know or anything like that.
Well, I mean, Cavani looks really good too.
Yeah.
My counter to that would be Cavani. I thought against Burnley, even though he's been brought in as this like experienced finisher, which we know he is. I was like really, really impressed with the way that Cavani was like tracking back and winning tackles in what I would consider the number 10 area, in around the halfway line, defensive third, that sphere. He was winning so many balls there and then laying off someone else. And if he does that against Liverpool, they can do so much damage if he's able to do that against them too. And so, it is challenging because, I mean, he could play either of them. Of course, against Burnley, he played them both. So he could do that too, because Martial could be used in a wider area, Cavani through the middle. But I think the fact that we're sat here kind of with two different schools of thought, because I totally get what you're saying. Martial's pace against that Liverpool defence could do a lot of damage. Cavani's hassling of the opponents also could. That, to me, is enough there to sort of, if people are looking at, are we going to sign one of those? It's hard to really say who's going to start. So I would probably avoid both of them.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think he's going to play up front. I think they'll want Martial, Rashford up against Trent for sure, and Fred and McTominay will almost certainly start. So the question is whether Pogba keeps his place, because I don't think he'll play in a 2. I think Fred and McTominay are almost nailed to start in this game just because of the opposition, which means he overplays Pogba on the left up against Trent. But I think Rashford's done Trent a few times, so I think there's a chance it could be Martial, Cavani, and Rashford on the right, but he wasn't that great against Burnley, so I don't know. It's a tricky one. I do think there's a high chance of Cavani starting too. I would definitely agree with that. I think he looked really good. So yeah, it's a hard one to do. The other one is obviously Lindelof at the back, because the last team news we did, obviously we said we thought, I think Lindelof had trained and Bailly hadn't or something like that, and then all of a sudden afterwards we find out there's a reaction, and Bailly's been good. So I think he deserves to keep his players. I think he's a better option against Liverpool. There's not been any real updates about Lindelof by name, was there?
No, well, I mean, I kind of imagine that's who he's referring to when he says he's going to give people a chance to prove their fitness. But as you said, Bailly's clearly recovered from that neck problem enough to play the game. Put his body on the line again. It's not seeming to limit the way that he can throw himself in the way of things with his head and with the rest of his body. So yeah, he will need that against Liverpool. And so then if Bailly's looking ahead of Lindelof, then he's probably going to be the one to go for. And of course, that Fulham game does look quite tasty for a clean sheet as well. So, Bailly is not a bad option. I mean, Maguire, obviously, of course, is the sure starter. If people can reach him, and it's just absolutely no suggestion that he wouldn't play these games.
Just the 4 yellows, I guess, with Maguire. That's the only
actually,
slight on his name, really. Otherwise, you've got Wan-Bissaka, who I've got, and I don't expect any kind of attack and return at all. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Fulham game, definitely the better one. Let's go to Liverpool, because I don't think many people probably own Matip, but if he comes back, it does kind of boost their defence, and it puts Henderson back into midfield, which also would be big too. What's the latest on him? I think this is mind games, by the way. I definitely think he's going to start. But go on, what do you think?
Yeah, it's tricky. I know what you mean with these derby games. Like sometimes they do kind of engage in. It's not underhand tactics, I suppose. It's just I think more managers should do this. I mean, as much as I'd love managers to give us something really sure and sort of like obvious. If I was a manager, I would be doing exactly this. It's what I always used to do on Football Manager back in the day. So I totally get it. He said about Matip that he's close. Does it make sense to throw him in after 1 or 2 sessions that he hasn't actually done yet? Because again, it's like Man City. The sessions he's got to do are this afternoon and tomorrow. So again, he's saying that there could be a reaction, like with the Lindelof thing. So I don't know. We'll have to see how he looks in training. He was then asked about whether or not he could move Henderson back into centre back again, which is something that he has done before. On that, he said we do have different solutions, and I'm guessing he's probably referring there to Phillips and Reece Williams, who've played at centre back. So I mean, if there's anyone trying to put together a free hit squad or even a wild card or what have you, and looking at those really cheap Liverpool defenders, I mean, I wouldn't be completely shocked if they played. If Matip's not quite ready, because the point is that he's gone on to say that Henderson is very important for them in midfield as well. And when Henderson did play centre back, he didn't have a bad game at centre back. I can't remember which one it was, but when he played there, they really missed him. Yes, that's right. Yeah, they really missed him in midfield. So I think he'd be loath to play him there again. So yeah, maybe Matip does play. The funny thing is, he says, "I haven't decided yet. Why should I?" So, yeah. I mean, I guess that just puts pay to this whole thing, doesn't it? He's just like, why do I have to tell you now?
So, I mean, yeah, I do. They did really miss him against Southampton, Henderson. I don't know. Reece Williams and Nat Phillips, I'm not sure. They're a bit like Maguire. They don't have too much pace, and they're a bit slow on the turn. For what it's worth, I think Nat Phillips will play again even if Matip's back. Chance of him playing 2 in a row are so slim. I think Nat Phillips will definitely play against Burnley just because height and etc. I think he's good for that. But yeah, it'd be an interesting one. I think if there's any way Matip can play, I think he will play because Henderson back in midfield would be massive. Outside of that, the main talking points: Mane, Salah, Firmino, Robertson, Trent, all fit as far as we know.
Oh yeah, absolutely no suggestion there's any problems there. The only other one is just Naby Keita's not ready to play. But again, that doesn't really affect us too much. I guess that probably just goes back to the Henderson thing. If Keita can't play, he's just down another person in the midfield. So, perhaps even more reason to make sure that Henderson's in midfield.
Yeah, and Thiago got 90 minutes last time, so that's huge. I think he'll probably start if he's available. So, yeah, going to be an interesting game. I'm looking forward to that one. Let's go on to Arsenal. So, obviously not got a double game week this week, but a few people may be holding Arsenal players going into 19 from 18. Tierney in particular obviously missed 18 out of the blue, really. We didn't know this was a thing beforehand, and it doesn't look like it looks like there's a chance he's going to miss the Newcastle game as well, right?
Yeah, so they needed to scan him today. So obviously, when we last heard from Arteta, the idea was that that they didn't know yet. Um, it's a case of how he evolves. It's kind of come out in the press today. I think David Ornstein, who knows what he's talking about most of the time, has reported that it's not too serious. He was tweeting that this afternoon, so he's got connections. He may well have heard from someone that the MRI scan didn't reveal anything too sinister. So if that's the case, well, what he's saying is, of course, it's not just about the result. It's the fact that they looked really rubbish without him against Crystal Palace,
really
and so they do need him in that position. They do have alternatives though, in that Saka finished that game at left back because they took off Maitland-Niles and brought on Pepe. So he could do that, and the season that Saka's having, you wouldn't put it past him being able to provide the level of creativity that Tierney can from the same position because he's just that versatile and that good. And I actually think left back was where we first were introduced to Saka back in the day when he was like really, really cheap. So we know he can play there. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I think there's enough doubt there for me to. I mean, to be honest, if you're looking at this game week and you've got a 5.4 million defender, you're not sure is going to play, and he's only got one game, and you don't have a City defender or you don't have a United defender, or it wouldn't be. I think it wouldn't be unsensible to move him on to someone who's more likely to play because I think there's enough doubt and enough alternatives at Arsenal.
And he's only got a single game week as well, so you could always turn him into a double game week player for a similar price. We'll talk about Reece James in a sec for Chelsea as well. So, yeah, it'd be an interesting one. As a Saka owner, someone who's bench boosted him this week, I don't want to hear him playing left back, but I know it could happen because I think Maitland-Niles was poor. I think he very rusty there. Any other major news from Arsenal before we move on?
Nothing major, I don't think.
Cool. Let's go to West Ham. Right, a lot of people, myself included, looking to bring Antonio in this week potentially for the double game week. Got 15 minutes, then 30 in the league, then played 90 in the FA Cup. Now, I didn't see the press conference, but I was following it on the West Ham website. And did he even get mentioned? Did you hear from him at all? I don't think he was mentioned, was he?
No, they didn't seem to talk about him, which is so frustrating. I mean, surely someone would even outside of fantasy want to say, look, you've just sold your only direct competition.
Exactly. And you've got a striker that's injury prone. Can he last, etc.? Surely that's a question.
Yeah. So in terms of will he start twice? All we really have is, I suppose, inference. Our own interpretation of would they really sell Allaire if Antonio wasn't ready? You'd like to think no, but I wouldn't have exactly said that West Ham have had fantastic track record with their transfer business. It's not been awful, but they've had a few sort of like stinking decisions. So who knows? It's a shame that he didn't say something like, yeah, he's fit and ready to go, no problem. Because of course, we know he's got that within him because he did that in Project Restart, famously so. And I think we both owned him for the game where he scored 4 goals. So he's got that track record. It's just there's that doubt. Is he ready? In terms of other things that were talked about, they actually annoyingly talked about this guy that I've never even heard of called Maipo Odubeku, who he talked about. This is what Moy said. He said, we're somebody we're looking forward to working with, but he pulled a hamstring 4 months ago and he's been out for 3 months. He's a young player we have big hopes for. We'd like to use him a lot and try and bring him along at the right time when we need him. So like what? Like we talk
The
about
the,
him. What is
the,
there
the
about Antonio?
cynic in me would say he's being talked about because they're trying to buy another striker and they
Oh
don't want the
yes,
price pushed up.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. He wants
yeah,
to create the impression to anyone they're going to buy a Allaire replacement from that. Oh no, it's fine. It's not desperate because we can use Odubeku,
yeah, yeah.
whoever that
In
is.
my eyes, Antonio is likely to start both if he's fit. But the chance of him finishing 90 minutes twice, I would say, is quite slim. Especially if they're kind of winning the first game, 1 or 2-0 or whatever. I think it gets brought off. But yeah, we've not heard anything to say otherwise. Apart from that, we're probably not going to find out any more info on him. So I think you just take the plunge if you want to. Because West Ham are obviously popular this week because they're the good fixtures. What about the rest of the players? Balbuena's still in a few squads. I didn't really get the quote. He said that he's isolating, but then he said we're just about okay. Was he still talking about Balbuena there?
Yeah, so quote was he said 2 players missing, and then he goes and mentions 3 of them. It's funny, football managers like they're so good at not finishing their sentences. If you transcribe a football manager, Grammarly or word spell checker will be like, "This is an incomplete sentence. What on earth is this about?" So he said we got 2 players missing. Fabian Balbuena was isolating. He came into contact with somebody, so I think that means that he didn't have it. So in a way, that's
Okay.
helpful because it means he's not having to recover from the illness. But at the same time, sometimes these players they miss 2 weeks of training, and then in the end, their flag on FPL is not illness; it's lack of match fitness. Because if they've been out of the training scenario for so long, then they're not actually up to match speed. So where he says, "But we're basically just about okay," we've seen this quite a lot, and it's been quite tricky in terms of trying to cover these COVID situations where people are in and out. Is they're really bad at telling us like that they've tested negative or whatever. If so, 2 types of scenarios. If they've had COVID, we don't usually get told that they're negative, and we sometimes get like, oh, if they're negative. Like we had that with Edison a couple of weeks ago. The Danny Ings thing, for example, which I will probably come on to in a little bit, is Hasenhüttl's kind of implying that he might have been able to train today, but he doesn't know because when he did the press conference, the results haven't come back yet. Then with Balbuena, he's someone who hasn't had it, but someone he knows has had it. So then it means that his isolation, I think, ends 9 to 10 days after the symptoms first appeared in his friend, whoever that is. And we're never going to get that information because it could be like, I don't know, his mum or
Yeah, yeah.
like his house cleaner, the kind of someone basically who doesn't work for West Ham. So David Moyes is not the gatekeeper of that information. So it is annoying. It means that he's still, a doubt for this game because as of right now, he's isolating. If he were to come back in time to play the second one, he probably wouldn't because he's probably not going to be match fit. So then,
And,
yeah,
and
you're looking at.
also, also Dawson's come in and done quite well. They've kept a couple of clean sheets. He scored their only goal in the FA Cup. So I think it looks like for anyone that's got Balbuena, I think no chance of playing both. Maybe one if you're lucky. And if you're looking for a cheap replacement, not maybe a long-term option, but Dawson looks all right, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, we remember him offering some goal threat with Watford.
yeah,
There was
last year.
at the end of last season. He, I think, was there like in the Project Restart. I think he was the player in Watford's squad who had the most shots
Yeah,
or
it
something
was
like
ridiculous. Yeah, I remember you talking about
that.
it.
So yeah,
I think it looks good.
possibly a good option there.
Yeah.
The only other thing to add is obviously there's Fabianski as well. This is the other player that he was alluding to. It's annoying because again, he doesn't say we're waiting on Fabianski to see how he is. We're not sure yet. That's like the worst possible answer because I would have loved for him to say something more pessimistic to the point that we can be really confident that Randolph would play both because I think he's still 4.4 million. So if you're assembling a wild card or a free hit squad for this game week, Randolph would be incredible if he was going to go for it. But as it stands, that now is a bit of a risk because there sounds like the possibility that Fabianski could play.
Yeah, I guess, and if he doesn't play the first one, there's a chance he plays the second one. If he's almost there now, they're not quite sure. Maybe he plays the second one. It's a bit of a risk, I guess, if you've got him, but possibly not worth a transfer. Otherwise, I think Soucek, Sofal, fine, right? Bit like the rest, yeah.
Oh yeah, they're very very nailed on. No
Cool.
problems there.
Okay, next up we have Leicester. So I think there was a couple of Pratt is out for 3 months, which is obviously a blow for the team, but in terms of FPL, it doesn't really make too much difference. I saw a quote about Maddison and Vardy. They said they were fine. They were just left out so as not to. This was the FA Cup they were left out of, I think, so as not to kind of make the issue worse. I think so. They should be good for the double.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they the quote was both Maddison and Vardy are available. If they played in the FA Cup, it would have been a huge risk to play them in this game. They both had ongoing problems, and we saw that as the window for them to receive treatment. So it sounds like that length of time was just to get them fit and ready, and now they're fine. And the Pratt thing just kind of helps solidify the fact that Madison's just going to start a lot more regularly, because it's one less competition for a
Yeah.
central attacking midfield sort of place.
Question, just really quickly. It's more of an opinion thing because obviously we couldn't say for sure. But a bit like West Ham, to be fair, they're playing on Saturday. They got Sunday, Monday off. Then they're playing again on Tuesday. So obviously, going back to Antonio quick, it's all well and good saying they'll start both, but there isn't much rest time. What do you think about Vardy in particular? Because I think some people are looking at Maddison, but Vardy's obviously the key man, and we've seen that before with all his rests in Europe that he can't necessarily play games in quick succession. I think he's got an ongoing hip injury. Do you think it's a risk to maybe bring him in, or do you think because of the rest he's just had, he's got a chance of starting both?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point because there is that precedent there. I think, the rest time really isn't that nice, is it? Because they play late on Saturday. It's an 8 p.m. game on Saturday, and then an 8 p.m. game on the Tuesday. I think you'd be very surprised if he didn't start the Chelsea game, or rather that Rodgers would rather that he started that one. The problem with Leicester is that Iheanacho just hasn't looked good enough to step in for him. So probably what will happen is that he would start both and maybe have his minutes managed across the two games. They can't even run on. I mean, not that Slimani was even close to a viable alternative, but they've just sold him as well. So the competition for his place is not particularly strong. So I would imagine as you said, it's just an opinion. I would imagine he'd start both, but maybe not complete both.
Yeah, I think that's like if they're in any way ahead against Southampton, I think he'll be off as soon as possible. But as always, it depends how the game goes. Same for Man City. I'm sure he would have rested more players against Brighton if they could have nicked another one or two goals. It just didn't happen, so they all had to stay on the pitch. So we'll see what happens. Let's go to Chelsea. So got an update about N'Golo Kante, but obviously suspended. What about Reece James? Because he's back in training now, I think. Did Lampard say anything about the chances of him starting at all? Because obviously he's still a very good price.
Yeah, so the reason why they're available and unflagged and stuff on FPL is because Lampard said we're all good. So it basically said that the squad is fine and that the only person missing is Kante. So because we kind of knew that James and the other one is Christensen were close to a comeback, for him to say that heavily implies that he's ready to be involved. It's a bit like the Sterling thing. He is available because the manager has said everyone's fine without actually mentioning his name, which I always like to make sure people understand that's why he's available rather than him actually saying it, without wanting to sound like a broken record. In terms of whether or not he would play, I think he will. My suspicion is that James will play because when he's fit, which we're hearing that he is, Lampard has usually selected him, and Azpilicueta has played, I think, the last 4 now in all competitions. And to be fair, Azpilicueta has made like an absolute history of his, of always playing. He's like the ever-present guy that can usually manage it, but he's not getting any younger. So if there was ever a time when Azpilicueta was afforded a rest, if it's when Reece James is ready to come back in, then I feel like now is the time to do that. So. I think he'll
Totally
start.
different player now as well. Like Reece James has really come in and kind of he's such a good right back, and he's so attacking as well. And with Ziyech there as well, I think Reece James just even better. So I think if there's any chance he can play, he will. And it's not like it's not like it's 2 easy games for them either. So I think if they can give him any kind of minutes against Fulham to then play against Leicester, it could be good. Also, their fixtures are really good right up until game week 26. So I'm very eager to bring him in myself. Don't know if it'll be this week, but if you've got him, it's probably worth holding on to him. Let's do Newcastle next quickly. I don't think there's really any major news here. Obviously, they do have a double game week now, so if you had Wilson carried over from game week 18, you're kind of in luck. I don't think there's any issues with him. St. Maximin is the kind of long-term absentee. He's back training, but obviously not going to be available just yet. Maybe soon, which will obviously improve them too, right?
Yeah. St. Maximin's like just an ongoing problem for them, isn't it? I mean, Jamal Lewis could come back in, Lascelles too, but they got a problem with Fernandez. So I mean, I think outside of Wilson, you're not really that interested, are you? No one's really interested in their defense. And then with with the uncertainties about who could even start in defence, it's just like, yeah.
And obviously, we saw after all the talk about Darlow versus Dubravka, Darlow kept his place as we thought he would, and was pretty much said anyway. So if you did have any hangover from Game Week 18 with Darlow, you're probably looking quite good going forward. Let's go on to Spurs. So similar situation every week. We're only really looking for the two lads up front, maybe Dyer, Reguilon news, but I think pretty much anyone we'd be interested in with Spurs are all fit, right?
Yeah, they were mostly talking about. It was mostly talking about Bale, from what we could see, which again is just, it's weird. I mean, I kind of was, when Bale arrived, we thought maybe that he would be someone that we'd be looking at a lot more often. But yeah, he's had these injury problems. Mourinho was kind of talking about the history there. You know, you're right. He was injured in the first month. He got an injury against Stoke. So yeah, he's mostly just been talking about that. It's annoying because when managers have these long-term guys and they then get asked about their injuries, they sometimes just start going off on one about someone we know is injured, and they don't really talk about the ones we want to hear about. The other stuff that he talked about is that Lo Celso's still not fit. He said we still got 2 training sessions before the game. And as far as he's concerned, there's no other no other problems in principle in the squad. But again, that's just another caveat that if we get to the game and it's like, oh, so-and-so got injured in training, to spare the comments of why didn't you tell us in the press conference, it might be because it hadn't happened yet. So it's always worth being aware of that.
Yep, absolutely. Let's go on to Leeds. So no double game week now. If you haven't heard, where have you been? Their game against Southampton is off in game week 19, so they're only playing Brighton. Again, I think for most of the players we own, Bamford, Rafinha, there wasn't any mention. The biggest kind of news, I suppose, is that Llorente and Cooper are both available. I don't know if there was any indication of whether they're available or whether they're likely to start. But if they would, then that would possibly push Alioski out of the team.
Yeah, there's quite a lot to unpack here because, as you said, it's like a jigsaw puzzle where you found the missing piece, but it turns out that you had put a couple of other extra pieces in to cover, and now you've got to disperse them again. Whether or not, the quote was that Llorente, Roberts, and Liam Cooper are all available. There's no other suggestion in terms of who would start, which is annoying because if there was any manager that might give us a team sheet, it could have been Bielsa, but he's decided he's not doing that anymore because he didn't like people taking the mick out of him on social media. I mean, I thought it was quite, affectionate, but clearly he took it the wrong way. It's a tricky one because in theory you could put Cooper and Llorente straight back in the place of Ayling and Strauch. I think Cooper almost certainly will come back in because he's the captain. He's their first choice defender, so he makes sense to come back in. But I'd be kind of surprised if he threw them both back in at the same time because Luke Ayling has actually played really well at centre back. Anyone who's watched Leeds over the last number of years will know that Ayling had that in him.
Apart from against Spurs, I think he was awful against Spurs. Lots of mistakes, but yeah, go on.
But generally speaking, he's held down the fort quite nicely. From what I've seen, anyway. So there would be an argument for consistency's sake, just putting Cooper back in next to Ayling, and putting Cooper back in would make Ayling more reliable anyway because he'd be next to a more reliable operator. I think that I suspect that's what they'll go with. But of course, there is the possibility that Ayling would then go back to right back, Dallas would go back to left back, and then Alioski can't play. But I just kind of suspect that it would make no sense to just throw 2 centre-backs straight back in who've both been out for a while.
And Alioski's played well as well. It's worth saying
Alioski's offered a lot. Yeah, Alioski's offered a lot. That's the thing is that Dallas, Alioski, and Ayling have all actually done mostly well in those what we perceive as makeshift positions. But they're positions that they've played before and had played, relatively a lot in the Championship. So it's not like Leeds' defence is broken and they're desperately looking for any opportunity to reset those players. They're all capable of playing those roles. So I wouldn't be too shocked if he went for simply a case of just bringing that one guy back in. The other thing just to talk about, though, is that I've obviously just said there that I think Strauch could come out, but I actually think Strauch is probably the most likely to fill in for the suspended Phillips in the CDM role. Some people have suggested it could be Klitsch, but I think he's more useful to Leeds as a box-to-box guy playing alongside Rodrigo as a main central midfielder. And also he's on 4 yellows. So the idea of asking Klitsch to kind of fulfill that kind of reducer role, I feel seems a bit counterintuitive. It kind of limits them further up the pitch. And even though Strauch has had problems playing the CDM role, I think the Leeds setup is better with him there and Klitsch further up. So the point there is that Strauch may still play even if he's not playing a centre back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll see how it all changes after this week, I think. But at some point, they're going to obviously want. I mean, it'd be nice for them, Leeds fans, to have 2 fit centre backs at once, because it hasn't happened very often at all this season. So we'll see how that progresses. All right, let's fly through some more of these. I think they're a bit less important. So Wolves up next. Still missing a few players. Usually Nuno doesn't give us any info, but he's given us quite a bit this time, right?
Yeah, if he was in sort of like quite a charitable mood, which is really strange for him. Yeah, so with him, it sounds like the Bolly could be back, which is kind of exciting. The main thing is actually that it looks like Neto needs to be assessed. So I'll start with him. He's basically said that he's within the players that needs to be assessed, and he had a knock that he's improving from. He's better today, hopefully better tomorrow. But either way, there's a suggestion that he might not be available. Podence is out, Marcel is out, Johnny is out, and then with Bolly and I can't remember who the other one is. I'm just trying to pull it up now.
Traore, right?
Yeah, Traore. That's it. Of course it is. Yeah, with Traore, they are being assessed to the point that they sound kind of confident they'll be involved, but it's hard to say with absolute certainty. The main thing for me from this, because I mean the thing is that we're not really going to be lumping too much in on Wolves players, most people, because of course, yeah, it's they only play once. The main thing that stood out to me is that he talked about going back to their foundations, going back to what they have been good at before. And he basically said we need to get back to our foundations, which is clean sheets. Now, when they've played with a back four, they've looked quite ropey, in my opinion. They've missed Dendoncker, and Dendoncker coming back is a help. But it kind of, there's just a lot with what he said today suggested to me that there's a possibility they might go back to 3 at the back, which is big news to anyone with Kilman because he could maybe come back in. But of course, at the same time, Bolly's trained ahead of this game, so maybe he comes back in as well. But generally speaking, if Wolves have a better clean sheet potential going forward, either between Bolly coming back and going back to a back 3, any number of those different scenarios, I think in a number of weeks we could be looking at them offering more at that end of the field again.
Yeah, and it'd be good for anyone that is holding them because they play West Brom this week. So fixtures doesn't get much better than that for clean sheets as well. So we'll see how they play against there and then, monitor that going forward, as you say. Let's do Southampton. So obviously, like Leeds, they are only having 1 game this week. So they're playing Leicester. No game against Leeds, of course. And then we found out that Danny Ings has had, I think he's had, he did test positive. He hasn't just tested positive, but he did test positive a few days ago. Is that right?
Yeah, so he tested positive in the aftermath of the Liverpool game. So he had, when the quote was given, which was on Thursday, he had already been out for 10 days. Yeah, it's a weird one. I always try and make a point of you often get situations where the people running the social media for the team, for some reason, misquote the manager in some way. They said that he could be back in training the next day, or that would be today, because he's done his isolation, which kind of implied that he tested negative. But then the actual quote from Hasenhüttl was, when you stick to the protocols, you minimize the risks, and that's what we're continuing to do. I don't know if Danny can come back to training tomorrow, but it looks like he's out for the weekend, which to me strongly implies that he at that point in time didn't have a test result for Ings. So it means that at that point, he couldn't say yes or no. Now, if Danny Ings tests just to double check that he's negative again, either came back last night or this morning, then maybe he's in training. But as I kind of alluded to earlier, if he's missed 10 days of being involved in training, then he's probably going to miss the game due to lack of match fitness, because that's such an important thing. If you sit around not able to actually work with the group for a long length of time, then it puts you in a bit of a challenging situation to be able to play the game. So, yeah, I mean, that's a long answer to what is kind of a simple question, but this sort of problem is just that just sort of explains and kind of highlights some of the issues that we as fantasy managers are going to have, because it's quite complicated.
Yeah, for sure. And I think whether or not you get rid of him or not, he's probably not going to play this week. And the fixtures aren't great for Southampton either. Arsenal, Man United, all to come in the next 4. But obviously, we should say for Southampton and Leeds missing their game, they will obviously have to rearrange that at some point. So they will have a double game week down the line. How quickly that is, though, we'll have to wait and see. Was there any other major news for Southampton? I didn't really see anything, I don't think.
Well, I mean, the list was quite long in terms of the updates he had to give. They're not necessarily all that fantasy relevant, but the big one is that Shea Adams is back. We kind of expected that anyway because I think it was connected to a concussion, so there was always a relatively short period for the recovery on that one. So he's fine. McCarthy is now back after he self-isolated. And with him being a goalkeeper, it's kind of easier for him to slot back in, I think, without having to be involved with lots of things. Redmond and Gineppo are long-term absentees, and Nathan Teller has some muscle problems. So it basically means that Walcott and Armstrong, there's just kind of no competition for them starting on the flanks. Shane Long will probably go up front with Adams because Obafemi's had surgery and Ings can't play. So the Southampton team basically picks itself at this point because of the number of absences that there are, which sometimes is quite nice if you're a fantasy manager.
Yeah, there's me saying there's no other big news. I completely forgot about Adams and McCarthy in particular, who are in a lot of teams and a lot of people hoping to use them in bench boost. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they play. Fulham next. Was there anything we need to pick up on here from Scott Parker?
Yeah, not massively. I mean, Mitrovic is a possible. Kearney and Lamina. It was a bit weird. He described them as unavailable, but then also said we'll see where we are in a couple of days. Which, of course, that when he said it included the game. So I think that's why they're 25% on FPL right now. Like he said they're unavailable, but at the same time, it's kind of implied that could change. But that's kind of handy for anyone looking at Lookman or Cavallero because Fulham obviously play twice because with or Zambo and Gisa as well, who of course is famously one of my blank game week players. But with those key injuries in those areas, it means that those three players I just mentioned there, it would be very surprising if they didn't start and start twice.
Cool, good stuff. Brighton, so they've had a lot of players out recently, Lamptey, Welbeck in particular, and I think they're all still missing, right? I think all the players that were missing last time are still missing.
Yeah, that's right. And that also includes their new signing, or not new signing, sorry. He was their player already. They loaned him out. He's come back as Jakob Moda. Apparently the game's come too soon for him, although he has trained. He's 5 million, I think, so we may see him soon. But yeah, in terms of the people that were missing before, that is Lamptey, Lallana, Welbeck, Jahanbash, Connolly. They're all missing. So again, the Brighton team almost picks itself, which is kind of handy, but at the same time it's Brighton, so
exactly.
To Az and Joe, it's not important.
Yeah. One team I probably should have put further up the list is Burnley, and in particular, Charlie Taylor is a player that's still in some people's teams, obviously hoping that he plays because it is a double game week. But it doesn't look like... I mean, it's not the worst news to get, but it's also not the most ideal when you're thinking about whether to sell him or not because he's down as a maybe for the West Ham game. I think he is actually the only issue they've got now. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's looking more positive for Burnley now. And again, I'm such a broken record on this, but we've got another classic case of what does it mean when a Twitter account for a team tweets something? You can't always take that. You can't always take that at face value. We've seen before. We've seen it with Rodriguez, and we've now got another situation where there is disparity between what the club have tweeted and what the journalists who were present at the press conference said, and then about 20 minutes later we get the full quote from Sean Dyche. So it's kind of like a story in three parts. Story part number one is that Charlie Taylor is a doubt for tomorrow, but the squad is coming back together now and everyone else are fine. That is the quote that Burnley's Twitter put out. At the same time, we saw from multiple journalists from different sources, from different papers, different media outlets, all describing him as a maybe, which is very different to doubtful, in my opinion. Then we get the full quote, and it turns out Sean Dyche said that Charlie Taylor is a doubt and a maybe. So who knows? But the point is that the very exact thing that Sean Dyche said is not what the Twitter account put out. So we always just have to be really, really careful there because the tweet that we put out was based on what we were hearing from the journalists as well. And we had a few people saying, well, that's not what the club tweeted. Well, yeah, because the clubs don't always get it bang on. So there's a lot of confusion over Charlie Taylor. I would probably avoid him this week, to be honest, because to describe him as a doubt and a maybe, that's just not helpful, Sean. Come on.
And I also feel like, look, he's a good player for them, and he's obviously first choice when he's fit, but I don't think he's going to be the be-all and end-all of whether they win the next couple of matches. So it's probably best to not risk him back or risk getting him back too soon. So, yeah, I would be pretty doubtful about him playing at least the first game, and the second one's against Liverpool, so it isn't ideal, that's for sure. And Burnley's fixtures are also not great after 19, so if you've got a transfer you can make, I would probably do it. I think the last club we got is Sheffield United, but from what I can see or what I saw, he didn't really mention anyone by name and just said they got a bunch of doubts.
Yeah, so I mean, it's classic Chris Wilder, isn't it? I mean, come on, Chris. I mean, I know we don't care about your fantasy players, but at least try and be helpful. He basically said that there's 7 players that he's kind of concerned about. Just didn't tell us who they were. He told us a little bit about Ollie McBurney, a bit of an update there, but yeah, classic Chris. But it doesn't matter though, really. I mean, is anyone really that bothered about
People
Sheffield
have
United
got their clean sheet from last week, and now they're back off them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think people are too bothered. So I think that's every team covered. I guess the headline stuff is I don't even know. A lot of the headline stuff I feel like we haven't actually definitely heard of. Like Antonio, as people are thinking out, Matip, Martial. We haven't got definites, but we've covered it all. So if you've missed anything, just go back. You can see when the team picture was up, and you can hear what we had to say. Obviously, if there is any updates, we'll put them out on Twitter. Sometimes you get late quotes, late news and stuff like that, so make sure to follow us there. And I'll be back with Breakfast Club at 9:30 on Saturday morning as well with Ted from TED Talks FPL. So if there is any further updates, which the way this season's going so far, there probably will be something major between now and then. We'll discuss it then as well. So David, I'll just say thanks very much for joining me and giving us all that info.
Yeah, cheers for having me on. And I guess just the other thing to point people towards is if anything does come out later on today, you'll be able to catch it on the at FF Scout on Twitter, but also on our team news page on site where we have all our predicted lineups. That's where we gather and collect all the team information that we've talked about here. So if you want a longer form thing, you can read. The other thing to say is that we haven't had this in ages, and it's really, really nice. It's Saturday deadline. And so then that means that anything that was embargoed from today's press conferences to 10:30 in the evening, it means we will get that pre-deadline. So definitely keep an eye on stuff at that time too. In the new normal, we've often had so many Friday night deadlines that those embargoed pieces of information come out after the deadline, so aren't any use to you. But on this occasion, they are. So keep your eyes peeled.
No, that's a great point. I think I'm trying to make transfers as late as possible at the moment anyway, but definitely do them after 10:30 tonight, because it's usually 10 or 10:30 when they come out on a Friday night. So yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah, it's 10:30, yeah.
Yeah, and if you have enjoyed this, do give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new. Just one quick thing before we go. If you haven't already checked out Fantasy Fly, there is a link in the description. You just got to make 5 picks. It's completely free to enter. No catches, 10 grand for the winner. Easy as that, and I've had a look. It's very winnable this week. So go and check it out if you haven't already. Click that link in the description below. Otherwise, me and David will say good luck. We will catch you again for Game Week 20, which is a while away, the deadline. So the next team news will be a little while away, but hopefully we'll have lots of information to give you at that point. So hit that like button, hit subscribe, and we'll catch you soon.